Alright, this is our last language video for today, and I didn't want to have to rush through it, so I'm doing another video, and this is for page 284 and 285. Now, page 284, we're learning how to diagram our complements. Now, I enjoy diagramming, so I think it's going to be fun to teach you. And it's not hard as long as you know how to find the things in the sentence. It's not hard to diagram it. The important thing to do is to find everything in the sentence first before you start diagramming. Now we're going to learn how to diagram a direct object, an indirect object, our predicate nominatives, and our predicate adjectives. And some of them are very similar. How do you do it? Now our direct object is going to be just a line from the line up, I'll show you, after the verb. Okay, so direct object, Tonto won the race. Let's mark our sentence before we diagram it. So find our subject. Tonto won. Won who? What? What did he win? He won the race. So that is our direct object. And then, of course, the is an adjective, and you know how to diagram that. So won is a action verb. He won something. He did something. So we know that race is a direct object. So first, let's diagram our subject and verb like we always do. You should already... That is not a very straight line. Try that again. Okay, do your line, Tonto, and then remember the line between the subject and verb goes through the line, Tonto, won, and then your direct object, when you make the line longer, won, you're going to put a line right after your verb, and it stops at that line. So it doesn't go below it like this one between subject and verb goes below. This one stops on the line, and it goes straight up and down. Tonto won race. So your direct object gets diagrammed right after the verb because it's describing it's won what? Won the race. And then obviously your adjective goes below the word that it's describing, the race. So Tonto won race. So make sure that your line does not go below your horizontal line, okay? It stays and it stops right at the line because only between the subject and verb does it go below the line. The next one goes to the line, goes straight up and down. Tonto won race, and then the describes race. So that's how you diagram a direct object. Just make sure that you find it first. Now, your indirect object is, we have the Lone Ranger taught the wrestler a lesson. Now, for an indirect object, it's always diagrammed below the verb, not below the direct object. And I would get confused with that, so let's try not to get confused with that. So let's find our parts of the sentence first. The Lone Ranger is our subject, it's his name. Lone Ranger taught. Okay, taught who? Taught what? He taught a lesson. Now don't get confused with wrestler. He didn't teach a wrestler. He taught a lesson. So lesson is your direct object, because you have to have a direct object if you can have an indirect object. And then taught lesson to whom? Well, he taught it to the wrestler. So wrestler is your indirect object. So then we go ahead and diagram Lone Ranger is your whole subject. Your line goes all the way through, taught, and then just like I taught you how to do direct object, what did he teach? He taught a lesson. Bring your line straight down and stop at the line, taught lesson. To whom did he teach it? To the wrestler. Now remember, the indirect object comes under your verb. And you do it just like you would do a prepositional phrase, but there's not a preposition. So taught, wrestler, and then the describes wrestler, so that comes under wrestler. So you do it just like a prepositional phrase, but you don't have a preposition. So you just leave that part blank. Instead of having to, from, among, you leave that blank. Then you do the other line. So taught wrestler a lesson. So he taught a lesson, but he taught it to the wrestler. So the indirect object comes under the verb, not under the direct objects. Don't forget that. So it comes under the verb. Lone Ranger taught, and then I almost forgot to put a right there under lesson. Taught lesson. To whom did he teach it? To the wrestler. All right, so that's how you do an indirect object. Over here, predicate nominative. All right, remember a nominative renames your subject. So the Lone Ranger, find your subject, is, find your verb, a hero. Hero, the hero is Lone Ranger. So you can rename it. So it's a predicate nominative. A hero is the Lone Ranger. So let's diagram. Lone Ranger is your subject. The describes Lone Ranger, that's your adjective. All the way down. Is your verb. Now, it's almost like direct object, but instead of having a straight up and down line, you're going to have a slanted line. Okay, a slanted line back towards your subject. Lone Ranger is hero. So because, remember, a hero is renaming the Lone Ranger, so think of the hero pointing back to the Lone Ranger. So you're going to slant your line back to the Lone Ranger because that is who it is describing. Lone Ranger is a hero. So predicate adjective, just like, it's a lot like the direct object, but don't go below the line. It stops at the line and it slants backwards towards the Lone Ranger. All right, that's how you diagram a predicate nominative. A predicate adjective is actually, you diagram it just like a predicate nominative. You have Tonto is loyal. Tonto is loyal is a predicate adjective because it's not renaming Tonto, it's describing Tonto. A loyal Tonto. Okay, so loyal Tonto is, but you can't say it's not renaming Tonto. Okay, it's just describing him. So let's diagram our subject and verb first. Always Tonto. All the way down is, and then just like a predicate nominative, you do it just the same. It's a slanted line back towards the subject and then loyal because it's describing Tonto. So predicate nominatives and predicate adjectives are diagrammed the same way. They point back to the subject because they are both either renaming your subject or they're describing your subject. So it all points back to the subject. So a good way to remember that, predicate adjective, predicate nominatives, when you're diagramming it, they point back. So it's a curved line back towards the subject. Okay, so read over that again. Study it if you need to. Read your think back on page 284 so that you know how to do that. And on page 285, we're just going to start it and then we're going to finish it tomorrow. It's just some review. Take it step by step. So I'm just going to let you do that. So read over page 285 and we'll finish that tomorrow. All right, I know it was a lot today, but you don't have science or history, so take the extra time and study your language, work on your language. You want to get this down because if you get it down, it's going to be a whole lot easier for you in the future. So go ahead and work on that, and you are done for today.